Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, Dandat Pranam, welcome to Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya. Today we are very happy to have the association of His Grace Sankarshan Priya Prabhuji. He will be sharing Bhagavata from 4th canto, 25th chapter, verses 53 to 55. The chapter is titled The Descriptions of the Characteristics of King Puranjana. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam, very happy to have you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare
Krishna devotees, Dandavat Pranam. I thank the temple management and the team for giving this opportunity. I would like to start the session with Kirtan, and then we can read the slokas. Priya Radha Madhava Jaya Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Yashodandana Jaya Gajanandana Jaya Yashodandana Jaya Gajanandana Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Hari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. नाम संकीर्तन की जय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयं धीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरों श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितनाम पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Thank you very much for the opportunity given to serve the devotees. So I do not have any realization or the knowledge to talk about this subject matter, which is very exalted. I am just sharing the knowledge as a matter of serving the devotees and for purifying myself. Otherwise, I do not have any qualification or knowledge to talk about this subject matter. I request all the devotees for your blessings and prayers so that I can speak on the succession of on the disciplic succession and do not deviate from the parampara. Thank you. Hare Krishna devotees. Today we will be actually reciting three slokas from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, chapter number 25, sloka number 53 to 55. So I will read the sloka, translation, and then purport for all the three slokas, and then I will share what I understood. So whatever I actually share today, it's based on the purport of Srila Prabhupada, and then I hear the class from His Holiness Bhakti Vinod Maharaj, and also His Holiness Prahladnanda Swami Maharaj. So whatever I heard, whatever I understood, I'm trying to repeat. So if there are any, if you see any good points, all the glories to them, and if you see any mistakes, it's all because of my deficiency and lack of understanding. Hare Krishna. So, we will recite the sloka number 53. Nirtrir nama paschadvas tayayati puranjana vaishasham nama vishayam nubdakena samanvitah. Word by word translation, and then I will read the translation. Nirtihi, of the name Nirti, Nama, called, Paschat, western, Dva, gate, Taya, by which, Yati, used to go, Puranjanaha, King Puranjana, Vaishasam, of the name Vaishasa, Nama, called, Vishayam, to the place, Lubdakena, by the friend named Lubdaka, Samanvitaha, accompanied. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Another gate on the western side was known as Nirti. Puranjana used to go through this gate to the place known as Vaishasa, accompanied by his friend Lubdaka. Purport. This is a reference to the rectum. The rectum is supposed to be situated on the western side of the eyes, nose, and ears. This gate is especially meant for death. When an ordinary living entity abandons his present body, he passes through rectum. It is therefore painful. When one is called by nature to evacuate, one also experiences pain. The friend of the living entity who accompanies him through this gate is named as Lubdaka, which means greed. Due to our greed, we eat unnecessarily, and such gluttony causes pain at the time of evacuation. The conclusion is that the living entity feels well if he evacuates properly. This gate is known as Nirti, or the painful gate. Next sloka, sloka number 25. Anda amisham pauro paurana nirvapesha kritabubhau akshan vatam adipati sabhyam yati karoti cha. Word by word translation. Andhau, blind. Amisham, among those. Pauranam, of the inhabitants. Nirvak, of the name Nirvak. Peshashkritau, of the name Peshakrit. Peshashkrit. Ubhau, both of them. Akshan, Vatam. Akshan Vatam, of the people who possesses eyes. Adipati, ruler. Tabhyam, with both of them. Yati, used to go. Karoti, used to act. Cha, and. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Of the many inhabitants of this city, there are two persons named Nirvak and Peshashkrit. Although King Puranjana was the ruler of the citizens who possessed eyes, he unfortunately used to associate with these blind men. Accompanied by them, he used to go here and there and perform various activities. Purport. This is a reference to the arms and legs of the living entity. The two legs do not speak, and they are blind. If a person simply trusts his legs to take him walking, he is likely to fall into a hole or bump into something. Thus, led by blind legs, one's life may be placed in jeopardy. Of the senses that are working, the hands and legs are very important, but they have no eyes to see. This means that in the hands and legs, there are no holes. In the head, there are many holes: two eyes, two nostrils, two ears, and one mouth. But lower down, in the arms and legs, there are no holes. Consequently, the arms and legs have been described as andha, blind. Although the living entity has many holes in his body, he nonetheless has to work with his hands and arms. Although the living entity is the master of many other senses, when he has to go somewhere, do something, or touch something, he has to use his blind legs and hands. Sloka number 55. Sahi yaryanta puragato Vishuchina samanvitaha moham prasadam harsham va yati jayat majodbhavam. Word by word translation. Saha, he, when. Antaha pura, to his private home. Gataha, used to go. Vishuchina, by the mind. Samanvitaha, accompanied. Moham, illusion. Prasadam, satisfaction. Harsham, happiness. Va, or. Yati, used to enjoy. Jaya, wife. Atmaja, children. Udbhavam, produced by them. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sometimes he used to go to his private home with one of the chief servants, the mind, who was named Vishuchina. At that time, illusion, satisfaction, and happiness used to be produced from his wife and children. Purport. According to Vedic conclusion, one's self is situated within the heart. As stated in Vedic language, Hridayam Atma Pratishtitaha. The self is situated within the heart. In the material condition, however, the spirit soul is covered by the material quality, namely goodness, passion, and darkness. And within the heart, these qualities react. For instance, when one is in goodness, he feels happiness. When one is in passion, he feels satisfaction through material enjoyment. And when one is in darkness, he feels bewilderment. All these activities are of the mind and they function on the platform of thinking, feeling, and willing. When the living entity is encircled by wife, children, and home, he acts on the mental plane. Sometimes he is very happy. Sometimes he is very much satisfied. Sometimes he is not satisfied. Sometimes he is bewildered. Bewilderment is called moha, illusion. Illusion by society, friendship, and love. The living entity thinks that his so-called society, friendship, and love, nationality, and community, etc., will give him protection. He does not know that after death, he will be thrown into the hands of a very strong material nature that will force him to accept a certain type of body according to his present work. This body may not even be a human body. Thus, the living entity's feeling of security in this life in the midst of society, wife, and friendship is nothing but illusion. All living entities engaged in various material bodies are illusioned by the present activities of material enjoyment. They forget their real business, which is to back to home, Godhead. Which is to go back home, back to Godhead. Next page, please. Everyone who is not in Krishna consciousness must be considered to be in illusion. One's so-called feelings of happiness and satisfaction resulting from material things are also illusions. Factually, neither society, friendship, love, nor anything else can save one from the onslaught of external energy, which is symptomized by birth, death, old age, and disease. To get even one living entity out of the illusory condition is very difficult. Therefore, Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.14, Daivi Hyesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya Mam Yevaye Prapadhyante Mayam Yevam Tarantite. The divine energy of mind consisting of the three modes of material nature is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Therefore, unless one surrenders completely at the lotus feet of Krishna, he cannot get out of the entanglement of three modes of material nature. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. These three shlokas are really wonderful, and it's really applicable for everyone, but especially for the grahasthas. So in this chapter, uh, we have seen that how Narada Muni was beautifully preaching to Prachina Barhisat. Prachina Barhisat, the king and father of the Prachetas, who was always engaged in the fruity activities. When we say fruity activities, it is not on the adharmic side, but on the following the dharma. He was engaged in the fruity activities and he was performing yajna, all those things. Narada Muni was very compassionate, so he wanted to deliver him. So he started preaching him. So he knows very well that if he tells the message of going back to Godhead and taking the path of bhakti, he may not be taking it if it is delivered as a direct message. So he uses an allegorical story using Puranjana as the hero of the story, and he narrates how Puranjana lives, and throughout this chapter, he describes the story of Puranjana. So ultimately, after hearing this, King Prachina Barhisat, he started realizing that hero Puranjana is nobody but himself. In other words, for us, for the larger understanding, Puranjana is the conditioned state of all the living entities. Puranjana represents the living entity, how he gets himself entrapped in this body of nine holes, how he is entrapped by the mind, and how he suffers. So that's the complete story. And after describing the entire story throughout this chapter, Puranjana realizes, Prachina Barhishat realizes that the sorry state of his condition, and then he gives up the opulence and kingdom at once, and he takes up the path of devotional service. That's the background and context of this. So far, we have seen our devotees and other speakers have been explaining how the body live, which is consisting of nine gates, which is narrated as a city, and how a living entity is entrapped in this body of nine gates, and what are all the nine gates that are involved, and how the body is actually interacting with these nine gates. That's what we have been seeing in the last a few weeks. So in this specific three shlokas, we will be the gate that will be focused is rectum, the eighth gate. So we will go through the details. So in these three shlokas, I noted some of the key points, which is probably very relevant to us. Prabhuji, the next slide, please. So the three key themes that are highlighted here is the greed, otherwise called as lubdaka, which is leading to the exit gate of death through the rectum. That's one key theme. The next one is association, the power of association, bad or good. And then the third one is the activities of mind, how mind is actually illusioning us, and how it is engaging us and entrapping us in different activities. So these are all the key themes, and we will go one by one, time permits, and then we can also see the application, how we can actually, what lessons at least I have as a takeaway from these three slokas. So that's what we are planning to cover in today's session. So the first one is greed, or lubdaka, which is narrated as the exit gate of the nine holes in the human body. The last week, His Grace Venugopal Prabhu was beautifully explaining how mouth is, one of the gate which is very, very essential, which can be either engaged in the activity of sense gratification, or it can be engaged in the spiritual activities. So how mouth is actually very important is what we hear from him. So mouth is actually having two functions, which is to taste and also to speak. So actually, all these 9 gates, they are all closely interrelated to each other. So in the modern context, we don't see this interconnection. So if you go to a doctor, so we have doctor only for specific. If you have any problem related to chest or heart, we have to go to a cardiologist. If you have problem with ear or nose, we have to go to an ENT doctor. And for eyes, it's ophthalmologist. Like this, in the modern context, everything is treated independently, right? They don't see the connection among all these components of the body. Whereas in our ancient wisdom, if you go to Ayurvedic doctor, when I went to an Ayurvedic doctor, so they say, the doctor said, all the problem starts with stomach. So they try to understand whether you have digestion power, whether the Agni for digestion is working properly or not. Because the Ayurvedic, the science of Ayurvedic, which is from the ancient Vedic wisdom, it sees everything in a holistic perspective. They see everything in a holistic perspective, and they try to treat the symptoms and sorry, they try to treat the root cause, and then which will lead to treatment of the disease. Whereas in the modern context, we try to, I think we have many doctors in this class, so I think they may agree. So the modern medicine focuses on the symptoms rather than looking at the root cause. So here, Narada Muni actually hitting the root cause and trying to treat that root cause, and finally King Prachina Barishta take that message and he transforms himself. So the first theme, greed or Lubdaka. So Prabhupada is very, very strong in the purport. So those who are really greed, eat anything and everything, right? Those who are eating anything and everything, they will be facing significant pain when they are evacuating. So all these 9 gates are interconnected. So if someone uses the mouth, it starts with mind, and mind is dictating the senses. I see something, and then it's temptating us, and then the nose is attracted by the smell or fragrance, and then we end up buying something and eating something, and then because it's too spicy or it is not digestible, and then it causes difficulty during the process of evacuation. Right, so all these 9 gates are thus interconnected very closely. So here in the purport, Prabhupada says that this gate, the gate which is mentioned as Nirti, this is referred to rectum, which is used for the process of evacuation. So this gate is also referred as the gate of death. So when a conditioned soul, when that individual leaves that body, the living the atma, the soul, it actually exits through the rectum, and it's described that this process is very, very painful. So depending on the consciousness of the individual living entity, the atma actually exists through the different one of these 9 holes. If somebody is really highly elevated, the prana actually exits through the eyes or through the Kabbalah. Whereas those who are not spiritually elevated, who are always engaged in the sense gratification, their prana actually exits through either of the 2 holes in the lower part of the body. So this is actually especially for the conditioned souls, when the soul leaves the body through these one of these 2 holes, that individual experiences extreme painfulness. So it's also described, I hear from one of the medical practitioners that a conditioned soul, a person who is in the last moment when they are leaving the body, normally the soul leaves only when the body, the abdomen is completely clean. So what happens is that person who is about to leave, he actually evacuates through the rectum, and then the body, the soul leaves. That's what I hear. So especially in case of a conditioned soul, and if they have the habit of uncontrolled eating, and because of that they go through different stomach diseases, and they experience significant pain in the stomach and while evacuating them. So that's the process of leaving the body. What about leaving the body when they are living itself? The process of evacuating the remnants from the stomach every day. It's very painful. So Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 17.10, he talks about the importance of food, and what type of depending on the mood of an individual, what type of food they consume. He beautifully describes in 17.10. So I would like to just read out the specific purport from Srila Prabhupada in that the specific sloka 17.10. Foods in the mode of passion, which are bitter, too salty, or too hot, or overly mixed with red pepper, cause misery by reducing the mucus in the stomach, leading to the disease. Foods in the mode of ignorance or darkness are essentially those are not fresh. Any food cooked more than 3 hours before it is eaten, except prasadam, food which is offered to the Lord, is considered to be in the mode of darkness because they are decomposing. Such foods give a bad odor, which often attracts people in this mode, but repulses those in the mode of goodness. So, what we eat is, is actually what we are going to be. So the importance of food is actually stressed here. So for devotees, also we have to be very careful what we are eating. Even among prasadam, I've seen many devotees who are advanced and exalted. They try to avoid even if it is a prasadam, they try to avoid which are essentially very spicy or too salty or bitter. Those who are in the mood of sattva guna, they actually eat the food which are mild in nature. So even among devotees, I've seen they actually they are very conscious on what they are consuming. So that's one part. And we know that each and every body in our each and every organ in our body is actually there is a demigod for that. So here the rectum is actually there is a demigod for rectum who is actually Mitra. So depending on how what we are eating and how we are engaging our senses, the the demigod Mitra will be giving appropriate punishment or reward. So if somebody who is in the mode of sattva guna or devotees, when they are honoring only prasadam, for them, if they are conscious with how they are eating, the demigod will be rewarding them appropriately. However, who is engaged in the sense gratification all the time, and they have to go through the process of the painful evacuation every day. What about the time of death? So, and then so we may be wondering, why there are so many such restrictions. So there are God has created this universe, material universe. God has actually, created the human being, and God has given a body to us. And this body is having 9 gates, and it has all the facility to enjoy. But there are a lot of restrictions. Why? Why there are so many restrictions? So if we contemplate on that, it's very clear, it's all, there is a purpose behind this. The material world is created for a specific purpose, and we are here for specific reasons. And these restrictions also have a specific objective. So we used to be with the Lord in the spiritual world, and we have fallen down to this material world because we wanted to enjoy this world, and we wanted to enjoy independently from Krishna, and we wanted to be in control of the world. Because of this independent mentality and controllership mentality, we have fallen down from the spiritual world. But Krishna is so kind and merciful because he wanted, there is a little minute freedom we have and free will we have. And, Krishna is letting us to use that free will. And once we fallen down this material world, yes, he wanted us to experience and then go through the realization what is our real objective what is our relationship, where we should be. So these restrictions are for that specific reason. So this world, I heard from one of the senior Vaishnavas, this world is like a prison. So when somebody is sent to prison, there is a purpose behind it. We are sent to the prison for the reformation. We go to hospital for getting treatment in the hospital. So obviously we would want to come back from the hospital or prison to back to home, right? So if the hospital is so beautiful and if we are so engrossed in that, then we would really forget the objective of life, right? If there are no restrictions. So this material world is created with all this restriction so that we go through this restriction. And when we are going through this unlimited sense enjoyment, we also face the difficulties. We suffer through this process of disease and pain. And then through this process, one may realize, oh, why we have this restriction? Why I'm not able to enjoy? Why I'm, struggling? Though it appears to be a source of happiness, but the same source of happiness is also causing me distress. What is the purpose behind this? What is the purpose of life? Why I'm here? What am I? Am I really a body or I am soul? So one started contemplating this. So the objective of having this restriction and objective of creating this material world with so many boundaries and also so with so many miseries is for someone to go through this process of difficulties and realize the purpose of life and the goal of life, so that he can realize, oh, I am not supposed to be here. This is actually the temporary place. Dukhalayam asashpatam. So my objective is to go back to Godhead. So through this process of suffering, the Lord is giving an opportunity also to experience whether we are really independent or whether really we are the owner or controllers, and then realize, oh, I am not the owner, I am not the controller, I am the servant of the Lord, and I am not the body, I am the soul. My original constitution position is to be the eternal servant of the Lord, dasanu dasanu dasa. So the Lord wants us to go through this process and experience it by ourselves. So that's why these restrictions are created. So how we can really experience? So we being devotees, if we eat only Krishna prasadam in a controlled way, of course we will not have this suffering. So Narada Muni, using this narration of Puranjana, story of Puranjana, by explaining these 9 gates and the process, the process of suffering one goes through these 9 gates, is trying to inspire Prachina Barhishat to realize his constitutional position, the purpose of life. It's a story to us as well. It's a story to me as well, because through this story, especially we being Grahastha, though we have facility for this sense enjoyment, but we need to really understand what is the purpose of human life, why I'm here. So these difficulties actually reminds us the purpose of life, why we are here. So that's the key point I realized in this sloka. So moving on to the next key point, key theme in this sloka, the power of association. So here, Prabhupada in the purport, he describes about the position of a blind man. The eyes, the legs and hands, they are as such blind. If they don't have the guidance of the eyes, which is in the head, they will be misled and they may fall into a well or somewhere. Similarly, when we are leading our life, if we don't take the guidance of the Shastras, then we will be leading a blind life, just into the sense enjoyment, and we may fall into the deepest hell. So if we take the association of devotees, and if we follow the guidelines of the Shastras, and if we lead a regulated life, we will be able to walk through the path of this devotion and realize the purpose of goal, the purpose of human life, why we are here, and lead a disciplined life. So it's very, very important to have the association. So we know that Dhritarashtra was having association. He was having the association of exalted personalities like Mahajans, like Bhishma Dev, Vidura. But he was not only he was materially blind, he was also spiritually blind, because he didn't take advantage of the association. He did not actually listen to any of their instructions. He was so passionately bound by the affection to his sons, especially Duryodhana. So, thus being bound, thus he was being bound by the affection and the bondage to his children. He did not take the advantage of the association of the exalted Mahajans like Bhishma Dev or uh, Vidura. Not only that, Lord Krishna appeared in front of him as a messenger for Pandavas. He advised that they should give at least 5 houses to Pandavas. So Duryodhana, he didn't step. Dhritarashtra did not intervene, and he was completely bound by the affection and passion towards his children, and that led to the complete destruction of the Kuru dynasty. The 100 Kauravas. Not only Kauravas, it completely led to the destruction. So similarly, we may be in the congregation, we may be in ISKCON, we may have association of so many devotees, but if we don't really take advantage of that in our day-to-day life, get some inspiration from the devotees by looking at them, what qualities they have, how they are leading their life. And if you are not taking advantage of that, we will be in a similar position like Dhritarashtra. Though we have the Shastras for our day-to-day guidance, though we have the devotees to guide us, but if you are not taking advantage of that, we will be leading ourselves to the deepest, the lower planetary system. So that's the key theme I see in the second sloka. Moving on to the third one. Yeah. So the third one is in this sloka, the purport, Prabhupada describes the activities of the mind. It's a very, very beautiful purport. So Prabhupada here explains that the mind actually is the one that is actually trapping us. So it's making us to think that we are really happy when we are in mode of goodness. And for somebody who is in passion, they feel satisfaction through the material enjoyment. And when somebody is in the mode of ignorance, he feels the bewilderment. So all these, the different level of activities, different level of symptoms that we see, they are all activities of the mind. It's all in the platform of thinking, feeling, and willing. So in Bhagavad Gita 6.6, Prabhupada describes, Krishna actually explains, mind is the best friend for those who has actually conquered it. And mind is the enemy who has failed to conquer it. Bandhur atmanastasya yenatmaiva manajita yenatmaiva atmanajitah anatmananastu satrutye vartetatmaiva shatruvat. For him who has conquered the mind is the best friend, but for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So here Prabhupada describes of in the purport for whom the mind is the best friend and for whom the mind is going to be the enemy. So who has actually controlled the mind and engages the mind in the devotional service, for them, mind is the best friend. Those who are driven by the mode of passion and ignorance, and those who are not able to conquer the mind, for them, the mind is the worst enemy. So in the purport Prabhupada describes, the purport of practicing eightfold yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is a simply waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus the life and its missions are spoiled. So even those who are following the path of Ashtanga Yoga, so if they are not able to engage the mind and control the mind, whatever the yoga that they are performing, it's going to be simply a waste of time. So for us who are following the path of Bhakti Yoga, Prabhupada has given a very nice process. So we have to engage our mind in reading and understanding the scriptures. And when we are chanting, our mind is engaged. When we are listening, when we are doing our chanting attentively, our mind is engaged in the process of chanting. So for us, Prabhupada has given a very nice path, and there are so many senior devotees who are actually following this. We should take some inspiration from them and follow this devotional service so that we can make advancement. So that is, one example of how mind can be a friend, and also when it is engaged in the service of the Lord, it can be our best friend. And when it is not engaged, when it is engaged in the sense gratification, it will be our worst enemy. That's actually described in the sloka. Also, in another sloka, which is 10.10, Prabhupada actually explains the importance of devotional service. So when we are actually engaged in devotional service completely, we actually make gradual progression. So unlike the karmis or the jnana yogis, there is always a benefit who are engaged in the process of bhakti yoga. Even if we make little progress, that's going to be extremely helpful, because one can continue their journey even in the next life. It doesn't mean that we have to, only make little progress and wait for next life. But on the worst case, even if somebody falls down and go back to their old activity, still there is a hope, because they can continue the bhakti yoga from where they stopped. Whereas in case of those who are following the jnana yoga or karma yoga, if they fall down, it's going to be very difficult. They have to start from the beginning again. Another big advantage is that there is no qualification needed. So those who are not even well versed with the slokas, or well versed in the process of Ashtanga yoga, still they can be engaged in bhakti yoga, because what is needed here is, Prabhupada says, it's a little bit of the sincerity. So if we engage ourselves in the devotional service, the guidance of the senior Vaishnavas, we can make gradual progression in our life. Even if we don't have any knowledge, that's okay. In fact, the positions, the knowledge, the wealth, they act as an obstacle in advancing in Krishna consciousness. So there is no need for one to be educated well in making advancement in Krishna consciousness. What we need is little bit of sincerity and faith, and perform the devotion service sincerely. So if one follows that, actually Krishna gives the intelligence to us. Krishna, he reveals himself gradually, depending on how much effort we put, and how much how sincere we are in our devotion service. Based on that, Krishna reveals himself gradually. So that's the advantage of devotional service. So we may actually, in our practical life, we may be going through so many difficulties, but Krishna, all these difficulties are kind of challenges for us, or obstacles to really test ourselves whether we are, how committed we are actually in our devotional service. So Krishna actually sees, despite all these difficulties, how much endeavor this devotee is actually putting. Krishna doesn't see the result. He's actually seeing our sincere endeavor. So if we put our sincere endeavor, then Krishna sees that, oh, this devotee is, despite all these material difficulties he's going through, but he is very sincere. He's putting sincere endeavor. And based on our endeavor, he is actually revealing himself gradually. So depending on how much shelter we are taking, right? For example, if I have to quote a couple of examples from the scripture, the Sudama Brahmana, he was very, very poor. He was going through such an extreme poverty. He was even, not able to feed his family on daily basis, but he was sincere in his devotional service. He was engaged fully in the devotional service. So later, when he met Krishna in person, he did not even want to ask anything. But Lord, being in the heart of every devotee, every living entity, he knows very well what is the need. So Krishna awards him. Though Sudama did not expect anything like that, but he awards him. But even after all the opulences, he continued to remain in Krishna consciousness. So Lord actually gives the material opulence to that extent that we can handle. He wouldn't give that much of material opulence if it is going to take us away from Krishna consciousness. He knows very well what we deserve and what we need. Only to that extent he gives. So we see in the life of Srila Prabhupada how much struggle he had to go through in spreading the Krishna consciousness in West. He went through so much of struggle when he was traveling from Mumbai to the US in Jaladuta. He actually practically he struggled. He didn't have proper food to eat, and he actually suffered 2 heart attacks, and he was struggling. But throughout his struggle, he had here, one thing he really maintained was the faith. He was so faithful, and he was so sincere in fulfilling the desires of his spiritual masters. And 1 year later, we know the rest is the history. So he has actually, it's not that Krishna actually tested him. Krishna used Srila Prabhupada so that we can see the life of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada actually, demonstrated how we should be actually walking through in our life when we are having the difficulties. Not only Prabhupada, if you see Prabhupada's disciple, and even among our own congregation, if you see, there may be so many devotees who are going through this material difficulty, but they have taken very strong shelter. So these difficulties are actually that we are going through. That's an opportunity for us to increase our faith. So when we are in difficulty, how much shelter we are really taking? So that shelter, depending on how much shelter we are taking to the Lord, and to that extent, the Lord will actually reveal Himself. Somehow, irrespective of the difficulty that we are facing, somehow if we are able to engage ourselves in Krishna consciousness and continue to perform in devotional service, then depending on the extent of effort that we, depending on extent of endeavor and we show, and the effort that we put, seeing that Krishna will reveal himself, and he will help us to advance in Krishna consciousness. So what is the real protection that Krishna is offering during this difficulty? The real protection Krishna is offering is protecting our bhakti. And that is the test we have to pass through in our difficult situations. Somehow, yena tena prakarena mana Krishna niveshayat. So like what is mentioned in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, somehow if you are able to engage in devotional service and continue to perform our devotional service in spite of all the difficulties, seeing our endeavor, Krishna will be really pleased, and he will actually help us to progress in Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada in the purport, he says, generally a devotee who is engaged in the 9 kinds of devotional service is engaged in the process of cleansing all the material contamination from the heart. He puts the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart. All the sinful contaminations are naturally washed away. Continuous thinking of the Supreme Lord makes him pure by nature. So these challenges that we are going through are the real, the opportunity for us to make advancement. So yesterday I was speaking to one devotee who happened to be an auto driver, who happens to be an auto driver by his occupation. It was really inspiring. So he said, during the Corona time, we know that there was lockdown, and especially for people like them, there is no way of earning income. So he said during that time, he said he had an association with one devotee. That time he was preaching him about the importance of chanting, and he was telling me that he chanted. Before this, Corona time, he was chanting, but the faith was not that great. He used to chant, here and there like that. But during Corona time, it was really a testing time for me. And I took the shelter of the Lord. I started chanting 16 rounds, and gradually that has given transformation. He told me that he gave up eating the meat and non-veg, and he took complete shelter of the Lord. So that's the time which really helped him to transform. So he said he started putting tilak and started driving auto, and though there was and there is still a lot of opposition from the family, from his wife and children, but he was completely undeterred. He pursued the path of devotional service based on whatever little he heard from his senior devotees. He was sincerely pursuing the path of chanting. He said, I am chanting continuously 16 rounds, Prabhuji. And that was the time it was really testing, and I took the shelter of the chanting of holy names. So the narration from him was really, really inspiring. How we can, even see devotees now, they actually, take advantage of Prabhupada's mission. Prabhupada, he said that, there is no qualification needed. Anybody from any caste and creed actually join this mission and take advantage of Krishna consciousness. So we see a lot of examples in walking in our congregation, in our life. So when I heard that narration from about his experience, it was really inspiring. Compared to him, if I take myself, I don't have those either the economical difficulties or socially also. He's in a lower strata of the society, but still, he heard something from the other devotees, and he took those instructions very seriously, and he took the holy shelter of the holy name very seriously. So, seeing that sincerity and endeavor, Krishna has responded and awarded him. Now he told me that he is coming to temple regularly, and yesterday he was doing a very nice devotional service. He was sitting and cleaning the plates. So it's really inspiring to see devotees like this who are actually taking the shelters. So that's the real message I understood from sloka number 55. How we can actually engage ourselves, engage our mind. How we can actually take the shelter of the holy name, shelter of the process given by Srila Prabhupada in difficult times. So depending on our endeavor and our sincere endeavor, Krishna will certainly reciprocate. That's what I understood after interacting with that devotee. I think each and every one of you may have come across those type of experience. So that's the real inspiration I got. I think we are running out of time. So in today's these three slokas, I quickly want to summarize. Is um, One is that the greed will actually lead us to the um, exit gate of death through the rectum, and we briefly saw the power of association. When he is taking advantage of the association of devotees, he or she will be able to progress in devotion service. And if you are not able to take advantage, and we are missing a very big opportunity. And then the activities of the mind and how we should take shelter of devotees in a difficult time. So this difficult time, the time actually to actually recollect and revisit what is the purpose of life and why we are here. And if we start introspecting and if we take the shelter of the Lord, that will really help us to cross over all the obstacles and also make advancement in the spiritual life. So that's what I wanted to share in today's session. If I have any devotees can correct me if I have done any mistakes. And if you find any good points, all the glories to Srila Prabhupada and his disciples and grand disciples. I'm looking forward to the comments and corrections from devotees. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for the wonderful points you shared on these three key themes, especially the point about our sincerity. Definitely, Krishna will reward with increase in faith and devotion towards him. Devotees can unmute themselves to share any reflections, or if they have any questions, please ask Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams. Excellent class, Prabhu, as usual. Thank you very much. Especially that miseries will lead us to the Lord, and Jignasa is a very important point, Prabhu. But still, miseries have led me to the God, but still I get scared of miseries, Prabhu. Like Kunti Maharani, I can't ask for more miseries. I feel it may break me. So what should I do, Prabhu? More?
Mataji, as you said, Kunti Maharani is in a very exalted platform, so we cannot imitate. But the inspiration what we get from Kunti Maharani is that despite all the difficulties, how the Pandavas and Kunti Maharani took the shelter of the Lord and they stayed in the lotus feet. And like we are very ordinary living beings, and Krishna also knows our limitations. He will not difficulties like how he has given difficulties to Kunti Maharani or Pandavas. He knows the limit, so he knows the extent to which we can actually withstand. So the difficulties that he is giving is probably would have been worse if you are not in Krishna consciousness. Really, after hearing from that devotee yesterday, it was really inspiring. So he was telling, had I not been in Krishna consciousness, I couldn't imagine where, which path I would have taken. Similarly, because we are in Krishna consciousness, because the Lord is very merciful, the mercy, the difficulties that we are going through is probably is an iota of difficulty that could have been that we would have really faced. So I think that's the firm faith and conviction. It's really easy to tell, Mataji, because sitting in the class and I can tell the Shastra talks like this and this is the reference. But when we are going through the difficulty, only that individual knows how painful it is. So, but the only thing we have to be, if you are grateful that the difficulty what I am facing, probably I deserve more. But because of Lord's mercy, I got only this much of difficulty. And the prayers like Kunti's prayers and other senior Vaishnava, senior Acharya's prayer actually helps us to be grateful and taking very strong shelter. That will be really helpful, Mataji. So the other tips what I heard from other senior Vaishnavas in the class is that we have to increase the intention of our sadhana. There are multiple methods they suggested. One is the easiest, the easiest method is to see how we can increase our rounds and how we can increase the intention of any other devotion service that we perform. So that would really help us in overcoming the misery. I hope, it was helpful, but that's what I heard, Mataji.
Thanks, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Sankarshan Prabhu.
Pranam, Prabhuji.
Very nice, very nice. I think, as you rightly said, when everything is well, we don't remember Krishna.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So one another point which I didn't mention was the importance of devotional service. Is we are actually now getting back to our normal life after 2 or 2.5 years of COVID restrictions, and also the temple, right? So we start seeing a lot of devotees, and probably after 2.5 to 3 years, we are going to have very big Janmashtami in the next month. So though we are, getting engaged in our daily occupational service and different, commitments, though we may have, but now we have a very big opportunity after 2.5 years to contribute, either in terms of Lakshmi or in terms of our time and effort for this upcoming Janmashtami. So I think our temple authority is planning big for these upcoming Janmashtami festivals. I think we should use this as an opportunity to show our gratitude to Krishna in engaging ourselves in whatever the devotional service we could. So I think that's a very good opportunity coming before us in the next 3-4 weeks of time. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you very
Krishna,
much for the
Mataji.
wonderful. Every day it's a challenge of being in Krishna consciousness. Very basic, Prabhu. Every day is challenge.
Yeah, that's
Thank
correct,
you very
Mataji.
much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu.
Thank you for the wonderful class. The discussion which we, subsequently we had also, the class was so nice. And one important point is about faith. And one thing I was just reflecting was faith the real test comes only in bad times. If we say we don't want problems, that's what everybody doesn't want, then we should be in the spiritual world. So that should be an inspiration for, for making sure that, we are put to enough tests so that we don't fall from that. That's what I felt somehow.
Yeah, that's true, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. That's Hare Krishna.
So I heard in one of the classes that our prayers during this difficult time is that pray to the Lord, to protect our faith. I heard that in one of the class. Thank you, Prabhuji, for that point.
Okay, Prabhuji, I think we can conclude unless anyone wants to share in a minute. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Giving class on a short notice. We'll conclude with Vaishnava pronouns.
Mancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhu vyeva patitanam
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namo.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. We'll conclude here today. We'll meet again tomorrow.
Hare Krishna.